Paper was invented in ancient China during the Han Dynasty and spread slowly to the west via the Silk Road. Papermaking and manufacturing in Europe was started by Muslims living on the Iberian Peninsula and Sicily in the 10th century, and slowly spread to Italy and southern France, reaching Germany by 1400. Earlier, other paper-like materials were in use, including papyrus, parchment, palm leaves and vellum, but all of these were derived from raw materials which were expensive or in limited supply, or required extensive hand processing to produce a satisfactory finish. Paper, being made from wood or rags, could be produced anywhere, and once large-scale production techniques had been developed, it could be manufactured in almost any quantity at moderate cost. In medieval Europe, the hitherto handcraft of papermaking was mechanized by the use of water power, the first water paper mill in the Iberian Peninsula having been built in the Portuguese city of Luria in 1411, and other processes. The rapid expansion of European paper production was truly enhanced by the invention of the printing press and the beginning of the printing revolution in the 15th century. The word paper is etymologically derived from papyros, ancient Greek for the cyperus papyrus plant. Papyrus is a thick, paper-like material produced from the pith of the cyperus papyrus plant, which was used in ancient Egypt and other Mediterranean cultures for writing long before the making of paper in China. Papyrus, however, is a lamination of natural plants, while paper is manufactured from fibers whose properties have been changed by maceration or disintegration. Early papermaking in China. Papermaking has traditionally been traced to China when Cai Lun, an official attached to the imperial court during the Han Dynasty, created a sheet of paper using mulberry and other bast fibers along with fish nets, old rags, and hemp waste, though the earliest piece of paper found, at Fangmatan in Gansu province inscribed with a map, dates from 179-41 BC. Techniques. During the Shang and Zhou dynasties of ancient China, documents were ordinarily written on bone or bamboo, making them very heavy, awkward, and hard to transport. The light material of silk was sometimes used, but was normally too expensive to consider. While the Han Dynasty Chinese court official Cai Lun is widely regarded to have invented the modern method of papermaking from rags and other plant fibers in AD 105, the discovery of specimens bearing written Chinese characters in 2006 at northeast China's Gansu province suggest that paper was in use by the ancient Chinese military more than 100 years before Cai, in 8 BC. It therefore would appear that Cai Lun's contribution was to improve this skill systematically and scientifically, fixing a recipe for paper making. The record in the standard history says, in ancient times writings and inscriptions were generally made on tablets of bamboo or on pieces of silk called jip. But silk being costly and bamboos heavy, they were not convenient to use. Tshai Lun then initiated the idea of making paper from the bark of trees, remnants of hemp, rags of cloth and fishing nets. He submitted the process to the emperor in the first year of Yuanzing, plus 105, and received praise for his ability. From this time, paper has been in use everywhere and is universally called the paper of marquee Tshai. The manufacture may have originated from the practice of pounding and stirring rags in water, after which the matted fibers were collected on a mat. The bark of paper mulberry was particularly valued and high-quality paper was developed in the late Han period, which used the bark of the than wood. In the Eastern Jin period, paper began to be made on a fine bamboo screen mold, treated with insecticidal dye for permanence. After printing became popular in the Song dynasty, the demand grew more. Paper was often used as a levy, with one prefecture sending some 1.5 m sheets of paper to the capital as tribute up to the year 1101. Uses. The first use of paper has been excavated in China dating to the reign of Emperor Wu of Han from the 2nd century BC, used for purposes of wrapping or padding protection for delicate bronze mirrors. It was also used for safety, such as the padding of poisonous medicine as mentioned in the official history of the period. Although paper used for writing became widespread by the 3rd century AD, paper continued to be used for wrapping purposes. Toilet paper was used in China from around 875 CE. In 589, the Chinese scholar official Yan Zichui wrote, paper on which there are quotations or commentaries from 5 classics or the names of sages, I dare not use for toilet purposes. An Arab traveler to China once wrote of the curious Chinese tradition of toilet paper in 851, writing, "The Chinese do not wash themselves with water when they have done their necessities. But they only wipe themselves with paper." During the Tang Dynasty, paper was folded and sewn into square bags to preserve the flavor of tea. During the same period, it was written that tea was served from baskets with multicolored paper cups and paper napkins of different size and shape. During the Chinese Song Dynasty, not only did the government produce the world's first known paper-printed money, or banknote, but paper money bestowed as gifts to deserving government officials were wrapped in special paper envelopes. Diffusion of paper. After its origin in central China, the production and use of paper spread steadily. It is clear that paper was used at Dunhuang by AD 150, in Lulan in the modern-day province of Xinjiang by 200, and in Turpan by 399. Paper was concurrently introduced in Japan sometime between the years 280 and 610. Islamic world. After the defeat of the Chinese in the Battle of Talas in 751, the invention spread to the Middle East. The legend goes, the secret of papermaking was obtained from 2 Chinese prisoners from the Battle of Talas, which led to the first paper mill in the Islamic world being founded in Samarkand. There are records of paper being made at Gilgit in Pakistan by the 6th century, in Samarkand and modern-day Uzbekistan by 751, in Baghdad by 793, in Egypt by 900, and in Fez, Morocco around 1100. The laborious process of paper making was refined and machinery was designed for bulk manufacturing of paper. Production began in Baghdad, where a method was invented to make a thicker sheet of paper, which helped transform paper making from an art into a major industry. The use of water-powered pulp mills for preparing the pulp material used in paper making dates back to Samarkand in the 8th century, though this should not be confused with paper mills. The Muslims also introduced the use of trip hammers in the production of paper, replacing the traditional Chinese mortar and pestle method. In turn, the trip hammer method was later employed by the Chinese. By the 9th century, Arabs were using paper regularly, although for important works like copies of the revered Quran, vellum was still preferred. Advances in book production and bookbinding were introduced. The Arabs made books light or a euro sewn with silk and bound with leather-covered pasteboards. They had a flap that wrapped the book up when not in use. As paper was less reactive to humidity, the heavy boards were not needed. By the 12th century in Marrakech in Morocco, a street was named Kutibayin, or booksellers, which contained more than 100 bookshops. The earliest recorded use of paper for packaging dates back to 1035. When a Persian traveler visiting markets in Cairo noted that vegetables, spices and hardware were wrapped in paper for the customers after they were sold. Since the First Crusade in 1096, paper manufacturing in Damascus had been interrupted by wars, splitting production into 2 centers. Egypt continued with the thicker paper, while Iran became the center of the thinner papers. Paper making was diffused across the Islamic world, from where it was diffused further west into Europe. Paper manufacture was introduced to India in the 13th century by Arab merchants, where it almost wholly replaced traditional writing materials. America. In America, archaeological evidence indicates that a similar bark paper writing material was used by the Mayans no later than the 5th century AD. Called a martel, it was in widespread use among Mesoamerican cultures until the Spanish conquest. The paper is created by boiling and pounding the inner bark of trees, until the material becomes suitable for art and writing. These materials made from pounded reeds and bark are technically not true paper, which is made from pulp, rags, and fibers of plants and cellulose. Paper making as is more common to the European practice spread to the American continent first in Mexico by 1575 and then in Philadelphia by 1690. Europe. The oldest known paper document in the West is the Mosaab Missal of Silos from the 11th century, probably using paper made in the Islamic part of the Iberian Peninsula. They used hemp and linen rags as a source of fiber. The first recorded paper mill in the Iberian Peninsula was in Zat Iva in 1151. Papermaking reached Europe as early as 1085 in Toledo and was firmly established in Zataiva, Spain by 1150. It is clear that France had a paper mill by 1190, and by 1276 mills were established in Fabriano, Italy and in Treviso and other northern Italian towns by 1340. Papermaking then spread further northwards, with evidence of paper being made in Troyes, France by 1348, in Holland sometime around 1340–1350, in Mainz, Germany in 1320, and in Nuremberg by 1390 in a mill set up by Ullmann Stromer. This was just about the time when the woodcut printmaking technique was transferred from fabric to paper in the old master print and popular prints. There was a paper mill in Switzerland by 1432 and the first mill in England was set up by John Tate in 1490 near Stevenage in Hertfordshire, but the first commercially successful paper mill in Britain did not occur before 1588 when John Spilman set up a mill near Dartford in Kent. During this time, papermaking spread to Poland by 1491, to Austria by 1498, to Russia by 1576, to the Netherlands by 1586, to Denmark by 1596, and to Sweden by 1612. Paper mills. A paper mill is a water-powered mill that pounds the pulp by the use of trip hammers. The mechanization of the pounding process was an important improvement in paper manufacture over the manual pounding with hand pestles. While the use of human and animal-powered mills were known to Chinese and Muslim papermakers, evidence for water-powered paper mills is elusive in both of them. The general absence of the use of water power in Muslim papermaking is suggested by the habit of Muslim authors to call a production center not a mill, but a paper manufactory. Donald Hill has identified a possible reference to a water-powered paper mill in Samarkand, in the 11th century work of the Persian scholar Abu Rayhan Biruni, but concludes that the passage is too brief to enable us to say with certainty that it refers to a water-powered paper mill. While this is seen by Halabi nonetheless as evidence of Samarkand first harnessing water power in the production of paper, he concedes that it is not known if water power was applied to papermaking elsewhere across the Islamic world at the time. Burns remains altogether skeptical given the isolated occurrence of the reference and the prevalence of manual labor in Islamic papermaking elsewhere. The earliest certain evidence to a water-powered paper mill dates to 1282 in the Spanish Kingdom of Aragon. A decree by the Christian King Peter III addresses the establishment of a royal moln dynam, a proper hydraulic mill, in the paper manufacturing center of Zataiva. The crown innovation appears to be resented by the local Muslim papermakering community. The document guarantees the Muslim subjects the right to continue their way of traditional papermaking by beating the pulp manually and grants them the right to be exempted from work in the new mill. Papermaking centers began to multiply in the late 13th century in Italy, reducing the price of paper to 1/6 of parchment and then falling further. Papermaking centers reached Germany a century later. The first paper mill north of the Alps was established in Nuremberg by Ullmann Stromer in 1390. It is later depicted in the lavishly illustrated Nuremberg Chronicle. From the mid-14th century onwards, European paper milling underwent a rapid improvement of many work processes. Fiber sources. Before the industrialization of the paper production, the most common fiber source was recycled fibers from used textiles, called rags. The rags were from hemp, linen and cotton. A process for removing printing inks from recycled paper was invented by German jurist Justus Klaproth in 1774. Today this method is called dunking. It was not until the introduction of wood pulp in 1843 that paper production was not dependent on recycled materials from rag pickers. 19th-century advances in paper making, although cheaper than vellum, paper remained expensive, at least in book-sized quantities, through the centuries, until the advent of steam-driven paper-making machines in the 19th century, which could make paper with fibers from wood pulp. Although older machines predated it, the Ford-Rainier paper-making machine became the basis for most modern paper-making. Nicolas Louis Robert of Essonnes, France, was granted a patent for a continuous paper-making machine in 1799. At the time he was working for Ledger Didot, with whom he quarreled over the ownership of the invention. Didot sent his brother-in-law, John Gamble, to meet Seeley and Henry Ford-Rainier, stationers of London, who agreed to finance the project. Gamble was granted British Patent 2487 on October 20, 1801. With the help particularly of Brian Donkin, a skilled and ingenious mechanic, an improved version of the Robert original was installed at Frogmore, Hertfordshire, in 1803, followed by another in 1804. A third machine was installed at the Fordriniers' own mill at Two Waters. The Fordriniers also bought a mill at St Neots intending to install 2 machines there, and the process and machines continued to develop. However, experiments with wood showed no real results in the late 18th century and at the start of the 19th century. By 1800, Matthias Koops further investigated the idea of using wood to make paper, and in 1801 he wrote and published a book titled Historical Account of the Substances which have been used to describe events, and to convey ideas, from the earliest date, to the invention of paper. His book was printed on paper made from wood shavings. No pages were fabricated using the pulping method. He received financial support from the royal family to make his printing machines and acquire the materials and infrastructure needed to start his printing business. But his enterprise was short-lived. Only a few years following his first and only printed book, he went bankrupt. The book was very well done, but it was very costly. Then in the 1830s and 1840s, 2 men on 2 different continents took up the challenge, but from a totally new perspective. Both Charles Veneti and Friedrich Gottlob Keller began experiments with wood but using the same technique used in paper making. Instead of pulping rags, they thought about pulping wood. And at about the same time, by mid-1844, they announced their findings. They invented a machine which extracted the fibers from wood and made paper from it. Charles Veneti also bleached the pulp so that the paper was white. This started a new era for paper making. By the end of the 19th century almost all printers in the Western world were using wood and newer rags to make paper. Together with the invention of the practical fountain pen and the mass-produced pencil of the same period, and in conjunction with the advent of the steam-driven rotary printing press, wood-based paper caused a major transformation of the 19th century economy and society in industrialized countries. With the introduction of cheaper paper, schoolbooks, fiction, non-fiction, and newspapers became gradually available by 1900. Cheap wood-based paper also meant that keeping personal diaries or writing letters became possible, and so, by 1850, the clerk, or writer, ceased to be a high-status job. The original wood-based paper was acidic due to the use of alum and more prone to disintegrate over time, through processes known as slow fires. Documents written on more expensive rag paper were more stable. Mass-market paperback books still use these cheaper mechanical papers, but book publishers can now use acid-free paper for hardback and trade paperback books. See also, History of Origami, Paperless Office, References. Sources: Burns, Robert I., Paper Comes to the West, 800–1400, in Lindgren, Utah, Europa Currency-ish Technik im Mittelalter. 800 bis 1400. Tradition und Innovation, Berlin, GEBR. Mann Verlag, PPA 413 Euro 422, ISBN A3-7861-1748-9. Vibra, Lucien. Martin, Henri-Jean, The Coming of the Book, The Impact of Printing 1450 Euro 1800, London, Verso, ISBN A1-85984-108-2. Lucas, Adam Robert, Industrial Milling in the Ancient and Medieval Worlds. A Survey of the Evidence for an Industrial Revolution in Medieval Europe, Technology and Culture 46, 1 Euro 30, doi, 10.1353/tech. 2005.0026. Stromer, Wolfgang von, Das Handelsschloss der Stromer von Na 1/4 RNBERG und Digestik der ersten deutschen Papier 1/4 Le, via Telgeschrift Fahr 1/4 Sozial und Wirtschaftsgeschichte 47, 81 Euro 104. Stromer, Wolfgang von, Gruel Innovation and Fabrication in Spa Currency Mittelalter und Fra 1/4 Newsite, Technikgeschichte 60, 1 Euro 6. Thompson, Susan, Paper Manufacturing and Early Books, Annals of the New York Academy of Sciences 314, 167 176. doi, 10.1111 per Joule 1749-6632.1978 TB47791 Zhang, Cian, Chuan-Sun, Paper and Printing, Joseph Needham, Science and Civilization in China, Chemistry and Chemical Technology, Volume 5 Part 1, Cambridge University Presser, Bloom, Jonathan. Paper Before Print, The History and Impact of Paper in the Islamic World. Yale University Press. External links: Egyptian papyrus,